regarding what you said before. Can you share with us one big lesson that you learned in 2013?
Big lesson I learned in 2013. Don't try to just plug in as much stuff as possible, because when ASICs first started coming out and the price started running up, it was call your mom, call your dad, get your cousins over here. Let's just plug it up, go, 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 so that we could take advantage of the price action. However, when the price started sliding in 2014, we're like, oh, this is not optimal. And we had heating issues, and we had cooling issues, and we had the wrong gear, and we had a terrible power contract, and we were in a bad location. So, I mean, all those things, taxes were a huge issue. So all those things kind of you'll see all those things happen around a halving or around a huge price drop off.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we have a very special guest, and we are shooting these interviews for you guys. Hello Leah, and welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be doing these interviews together with you.
So for the people who from my audience that don't know you very well, maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Leah Thompson, and I run a channel called Girl Gone Crypto, where I interview various people in the space and make kind of educational content about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So Girl Gone Crypto is where you can find me pretty much anywhere online.
You're doing a fantastic job, and we have been waiting and looking forward to do this video together for a very long time. So guys, we're going to interview 3 top miners in the industry. We're going to ask them different questions regarding to the Bitcoin halving. So get ready and let's go. Vamos.
One of the kind of biggest questions that people have around the Bitcoin halving is, what are the implications on the price of Bitcoin going to be? So what are your thoughts on that? And also, does this current global pandemic have any influence on your answer as well?
Touch 2 very sensitive topics with the same question. Like, the global pandemic definitely will have an impact. It already has a strong impact to a lot of markets, and Bitcoin market is not an exception to this. It is more difficult to analyze what the whole thing about this disease will have than what halving will have as an effect. My personal opinion is that halving is definitely a pressure for price, but I don't expect to be as strong as people would love to see, and a lot of miners would like to see doubling of the price quite immediately after halving, and I don't expect that. Of course, I would like to see it. I would like to see like 20 times the price, but yeah, let's be reasonable. I don't think that the increased pressure would be so strong.
I can tell you that what my thoughts are is we'll see something very similar to the past few halvings, where the price will probably creep up just before the halving, and then probably go down for a few months, and then it'll stay low, and then maybe after 6 or 8 months it'll start to go back up. That's just my personal opinion. As far as the pandemic and what we're seeing, I can tell you that for one of my newest operations that we're building out in Canada specifically, the shipments have been delayed, not for miners, but for materials that we use for building our racks, more transformers, that kind of stuff. And as far as the new one that we're building in the States, we have not really seen any kind of construction delay yet, but so we're not manufacturers being very awesome, and they're shipping the gear on time. But as far as infrastructure and, we order a lot of steel and concrete and that kind of stuff, that stuff is being delayed a little bit.
I think the situation with Bitcoin is always different to all other cryptocurrencies. It has the most hash power, has the most investment behind it. So there's always ways to look at ways you can analyze what happened to other coins and their halving, and see perhaps that happens on Bitcoin, if that's going to happen on Bitcoin. But since Bitcoin has its own beast, basically, it's very difficult to tell. What I do know is that a lot of miners that are mining right now are going to have to shut off because they're going to be obsolete after the halving. So me personally, and POOLIN, the mining pool I work with, we do expect a pretty big amount of hash power to leave the Bitcoin network after the halving. If that relates to a lower Bitcoin price, I don't know. I wish I knew. If I knew, I wouldn't be here right now. I would be in some island somewhere.
A lot of people will be worrying about centralization after the halving. What are your thoughts regarding this topic, centralization, from a hash rate point of view and from a manufacturing point of view?
I think the centralization argument is ridiculous. You need to understand that there's miners all across the globe. I mentioned a few key hotspots, but there's a lot of mining taking place all over the globe. And these miners can choose any mining pool they want to. Some big mining pools, like let's say POOLIN, we've been doing this for a long time. We know what we're doing, so they choose us, and we have good tools. But they don't have to. They can go to the next pool that has just a few miners with a change of code that takes maybe 30 seconds. So I don't see the smaller miners getting priced out. That's not necessarily true. What can happen now is actually smaller miners can actually jump into the game. They can buy a new equipment. They can forecast, knowing that there's only going to be 6.25 Bitcoin, so they can forecast, let's say, their profits and earnings or whatever. And they now have a better chance of getting in after the halving than any other time, because if my what I think is going to happen is the hash rate is going to drop, and that's a good time also for small miners to come in. So it's going to help decentralize the game even more. So it's a great thing.
I think you're starting to see more manufacturers. There are more manufacturers now than, let's say, maybe 3 years ago. So that's good. The nice thing about Bitcoin chips is they're not as hard to manufacture as, let's say, like a graphics card or a CPU. So there's plenty of very, very smart people that can be utilized to make Bitcoin chips that are not currently. So as far as what you need to know in order to make a Bitcoin chip, it's not that specialized. As far as the hash power goes, I mean, you saw a huge drop off in miners recently with the price drop. And I would expect to see that with the halving drop. However, from 2017 till now, you're seeing a huge drop off with miners because a lot of people overbuilt. And people like myself are taking advantage of that and expanding. So you are seeing a concentration of locations that's very similar to what we saw way back in 2013 when the price ran up to $1,000, $1,200, and then crashed again. You saw a lot of concentration of hash power kind of moving around and coming to one location. So however, right now, almost everybody is using a pool to mine. So the reality is, as far as the Bitcoin network is concerned, the pools have always been a place for centralization. And at this point, Bitcoin miners are disincentivized to hurt the network because not only is our gear only usable for Bitcoin, but also the data centers itself. A lot of people like to falsely think that we can reuse these data centers for web hosting, stuff like that. But the reality is you can't. I mean, some of these places only have 3 walls. They don't even have 4 walls around them. And nobody's going to put a web server there ever. So miners are the greatest losers if Bitcoin is ever kind of co-opted or coerced in any way. The reality is, yes, it's becoming more centralized and more specialized as far as operations go. but I don't necessarily see that as like an imminent threat to Bitcoin.
Unfortunately, it increases the pressure for being efficient as a miner, and without rising price, inevitable consequence of halving is somebody is going to be kicked out of the game, which typically is the smallest miners or the least efficient miners. And again, unfortunately, it is a pressure for like leaving the smaller, more distributed miners out of game. But at the same time, there are like counter pressures for like pushing the distribution of miners, at least geographically, more than in previous years, because the competition is stronger and stronger, so that people need to find places with very cheap electricity, and it tends to be spread geographically because the sources are typically local, and once you would have to include transfer of the electricity, then the price goes up. So the miners are typically forced to go to the electricity source and not vice versa. So there are other pressures than helping with this centralization pressure, let's say. Yeah, but it's how it is. There is not a lot of things what can be done against that.
How do you see government regulations impacting the mining community, and what are your thoughts on how that might change in the next coming years?
Regulation is one I get a lot since I've got a lot of experience in China. I think actually the bigger issue is in the States. A lot of the Chinese people that are mining and foreign people who are mining in China now are not really at great risk of having any kind of regulatory oversight. As far as the States go, I mean, that's always an evolving situation. And the reality is, I mean, the US doesn't even know what they want ever. So we're always kind of in a constant state of flux. Canadian miners have gotten recently good news. People who mine in India got great news recently. So I think now the focus for regulation on how it concerns miners is shifting stateside. But the concerns are broad and not very targeted at this point yet. So I think it's still a developing story.
It's actually a very, very important factor in mining, because let's say you're mining in Venezuela. Well, no, Venezuela is a bad example. Let's say you're mining in Uzbekistan or Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan was a really hot spot in mining just a year ago or a year and a half ago. And all of a sudden, the Uzbekistan government said, "Oh, you can't mine anymore; it's illegal." Or no way, what they did is they just jumped the price of electricity to 100% to all the mining farms. So they didn't make it illegal, but they just basically shut down all the mining farms like that. And then they added regulation, and they're actually right now building their own mining pool, their own national mining pool, which is required, which all mining farms based in Uzbekistan must go through their mining pool. So it's as a mining farm operator, your risk tolerance is always something you need to consider. If you want to go for the cheaper electricity, and let's say in Uzbekistan, because it's very cheap, you're gonna have to. The risk is that the government might change its mind one day and say, look, it's 100% more expensive now to mine in our country. Or you go to a little bit more expensive in terms of electricity costs, like Iceland, for example, which Iceland is a very stable government in the EU, and nothing's gonna happen there. So yeah, that's something that you have to consider.
What are the factors that usually miners need to adjust after halving occurs, from a technical perspective and from a business perspective?
I don't see there is a difference for miners. The only thing what is changing is, let's say, the price. It's the same. Halving is, from miners' perspective, it's completely the same as lowering the price to half. And it happens every so often. Like the last price dip, when we lost I don't know, 60% of the price, was kind of halving, because the income for miners got cut into half.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, the only difference for miners is it's planned, it's projected to some particular date. Everybody knows it's going to happen, but this is the only difference. So from like strategic perspective, I don't think there's a lot to do other than being efficient, which is always present need for miners to be like.
Yeah.
From this perspective, I don't see halving as something very special. It's just planned. Everybody knows the date. It's the only difference.
Technical perspective, what we're doing right now leading up to the halving, especially because we saw a recent drop in difficulty, we are trying to overclock as much as possible because our power rate is very competitive, and we want to get as much Bitcoin before the halving because we're not planning on selling right now. So from a business and technical standpoint, leading up to the halving, we are overclocking our machines to get as much hash rate as possible to get as much Bitcoin because we're not planning on selling. My operation specifically is not planning on selling our Bitcoin until well past the halving. However, post-halving, what we're trying to do is we've already paid for our power contract for all of our locations currently for up to 18 months. So we have 18 months of runway to kind of try to hedge against the Bitcoin price using our Bitcoin. So right now it's a stockpile game. And then afterwards, it's more of a hedging game to see kind of what the price action does on into the future.
From a technical perspective, there's no difference really, because remember that halving is just a protocol rule that's been put in by Satoshi Nakamoto. There's nothing to do there. Business side is where it's really something to look into. The mining equipment needs to be, well, like the reward is split in half. So the miners that you have now, for example, running, and you're making, let's say, just enough profit, just a bit more profit, just a bit of profit, won't be profitable after the halving because everything's going to be going half. So you need to look into possibly mining equipment. And if you want to continue mining with this old equipment, you need to find a cheaper source of electricity or sell it to someone, which is difficult. It's difficult to sell machines. There's the regions where a lot of mining takes place are in China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Venezuela, Argentina, Paraguay, United States and Canada, and to some extent Norway and Iceland, a bit of Sweden, I think as well. So these places are all over the place. So to send these miners and sell these miners and to get these miners to new locations is one hell of a logistical nightmare. So that's also a problem. And then one thing that's always a problem in mining is the regulatory regulation in these countries.
What opportunities do you think that the halving presents to the mining community?
Because the Bitcoin halving is also going to have an effect on other GPU miners currently. And a lot of people right now are doing what's called spec GPU mining. They're speculating on new tokens, this kind of stuff. So they're mining at a loss in hopes that maybe a year or two in advance, they can sell them at a profit. And the halving will give these kind of altcoins some interesting dynamics. I can't say if it'll be good or bad because right now we just mine Bitcoin. I don't know if that answers the question necessarily. So I think in general, it's not so much about Bitcoin miners, but more about GPU miners currently.
I think it's just the same game. There's no, I mean, okay, well, there's actually perhaps a change of hands or a change of guards, maybe. I mean, some mining farms won't be able to survive this event or are already gone, and the halving allows for new players to come in a it's basically you can forecast business businesses can forecast now, knowing there's only going to be 6.25 Bitcoin per block. So as a new player, this is actually a good time to come in into mining. So that is actually, and I'm a big believer of capitalism, and I believe the more competition and the more different parties trying to do something, the better it is at the end of the day.
If you think you're the best, the most efficient, the opportunity for you is to grab a larger part of the pie, because you can let other people bleed out, and then you can be stronger, bigger. This is probably the biggest opportunity for some smaller portion of miners, but otherwise, I don't think it is so big difference in general.
What impact do you think the halving will have on the mining industry? It could be either positive or negative.
I think mining is going to continue to be a very interesting section of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. I do foresee bigger players coming into the game in the near future. I'm talking about big established players. So it's only gonna get more difficult. So if
Why?
you're gonna,
Why do you think Ali, bigger players are coming?
well, because if Bitcoin is to succeed, which I really do believe it will, you're basically, as a miner, what are you doing? You're maintaining the network, and you're getting paid in Bitcoin. You're creating Bitcoin, and if it's a successful system, successful financial tool, that I think it will be, then a lot of big players would like to be, creating Bitcoin and maintaining the network of a successful tool. So that's what I think. Additionally, it's a profitable business. It's been profitable, and it does not stop being profitable. So I do see a lot of big players coming in, but not like next year, but like in 5-10 years time.
I think you're going to see a lot of people who are amateurs get wrecked. I personally got wrecked in 2013, so we learned our lessons very early. A lot of people aren't as fortunate because they got in the run up in 2016, 2017, so they haven't had to learn a very hard lesson yet. And they've not had to go through a halving yet unless they got in 2016. So the reality is a ton of miners are going to get wiped out, and you're already seeing that in the secondary market. There's a lot of old crappy gear up for sale right now. There's a lot of transformers up for sale right now. I can buy copper cable from places right now. That means they literally shut down. And it's all very cheap. So seasoned miners can take advantage of that and scale their operations up at a reduced capex. And people who overbuilt, they're going to get wrecked. But that's also kind of the point of mining, is it's a self-healing mechanism. Not only is the price and the difficulty healing for the entire network, but crappy miners who run at too thin of a margin are going to get wiped out too. And so you want constant stable hash rate, and the halving kind of helps that.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the crypto world, I hope you really liked this video with Lea. We really enjoyed having these really knowledgeable people from the mining industry. We will for sure invite some of them to come to our channels again, because we were blown minded by these answers and more information that we got that we couldn't share with you this time. But Lea, thank you so much for being here, for doing this with me. And if you don't know Lea's channels yet, you can find it in the description of this video. Girl Gone Crypto in all social media platforms, even in TikTok. You should go and follow her in TikTok. And no, it was a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Catalina. It's been really fun to do these interviews with you. And so thank you again so much for having me on your channel.
And guys, comment below what you would like to see us doing next. And if you really like this video about the Bitcoin halving. So thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Ciao.